Greetings everyone, this is Hooch. I've got a message for you today about why the Big Bang doesn't make any sense, and if you need help finding out that there's a creative force in the universe, I urge you to just stare into my face, because nothing this ridiculous could be produced by mere random chance alone. This is intelligent design with a sense of humor. Yes, that's the intro from Hooch. He has now been taken outside and allowed to complete his natural calling and complete the nitrogen cycle, aka piss on the grass. And that brings us to the point of this video, which is that the Big Bang and all of the gravity-based cosmology that is being peddled to the masses right now in all the mainstream media outlets and all the movies is garbage. It does not make sense, and at this point there's so many holes it looks like Swiss friggin' cheese. If it was a boat, it would have sank 12 years ago or more. And I'm just going to elucidate a few key points to illustrate, this hypothesis that the Big Bang is a creationist mishmash of a whole bunch of nonsense that was originally put forth by George Lemaitre, who was a cardinal. He worked for the Vatican, yes, and he was a Jesuit. Anybody who knows anything about the church hierarchy and the different organizations knows that the Jesuits do not screw around. They are some hardcore church officials, and these are the people who colonized the New World. Colonized, yeah. The people who brought in all sorts of crazy torture to witches and all the native people who inhabited the Americas. So it was a Jesuit, okay, who came up with the idea of the Big Bang. I've heard some hilarious explanations about how he kept his religious beliefs and his scientific beliefs separate, and it's garbage. He wanted to reconcile his cosmology, his science, with the creation story in the book of Genesis and the Bible, which says everything came out from, it's a little more complex, but yeah, fiat lux, let there be light, and everything exploded from a single point. And, ignoring the religious questions, but basically, George, he was a Jesuit, and basically he came up with the Big Bang theory that is treated as religious dogma in science today. It is unquestionable, which is really silly because it's nonsense, and virtually every new astronomical data that comes in, they're so surprised. Wow, this comet is acting super crazy. We never would have predicted any of this. Oh, we found this new planet. We found a star that burns colder than ice, that could, colder than room temperature. That's really strange. We're so confused by all this. It's like every new information that comes out, they're like, wow, we're really going to have to, rethink something and add in some new nonsense into the model to make it work. And as I've alluded to several times, the biggest, most glaring, obvious one of these staring you in the face is dark matter and dark energy. They literally don't know where 94% of the universe is, so they're just like, it must be invisible. Yeah, it's like Gandalf matter. It's like unicorn matter. It doesn't really exist. It's in an alternate dimension, right? So they make fun of people who deviates from the standard gravity-based cosmology even an inch as quack, lunatic, where's your sources? Have you been published in a journal? They go crazy. And these are the people who supposedly are skeptics, and yet, oh yeah, everything exploded from nothing, and yeah, it's just constantly exploding, and we don't know where 94% of the mass in the universe is. Oh yeah, that sounds rational to me, I'll buy that. What the fuck? Serious, guys, this is religious dogma. The Big Bang has so many holes in it. You don't know where most of the universe is. You had to invent it, dark matter and dark energy. You can't explain virtually half the stars that we observe in the sky, including some of the wilder findings of late, which is a star that burns colder than ice. How is that supposed to be explained in a fusion model? Also, the surface of the sun is colder than the field out surrounding it. How does that make sense in a fusion model? If it's all just generating nuclear fusion, why the hell would the surface be colder than the corona, right? So there's questions about comets. The accretion model of how the solar system formed doesn't make any sense. It doesn't explain for the different variation of the planets. There's so many things, and it's just serious, guys? I listen to these freaking mainstream physicists oh yeah, and let's fly through the universe together and feed you this whole load of bullshit and fantasy. I mean, even Einstein himself was like, my imagination and sense of fantasy has served me more usefully than my acquisition of knowledge in this life. He said that, right? The magical icon of religious, scientific, dogmatic priest hierarchy. It's all out in the open, guys, but you're fed a narrative, and until you learn to specifically question the tenets of that narrative, it's like, yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah, black holes, yeah, all right, and the universe exploded from nothing, and, that totally makes sense. But it doesn't. And, gravity is such a weak force that to explain these grand motions of the cosmos, in order for you to make that explainable by gravity, you have to come up with all sorts of crazy shit, like a black hole, in order to have that amount of power to, create like warping of gravitational field around it in such a manner, it must just have so much mass. It must just be so big and so dense that it just, gravity just pulls everything in, including light. And yet then we find black holes with X-ray emissions, which doesn't make sense because X-rays shouldn't even be able to escape the black hole. So and I'm not even a physicist, I'm an English major. I'm just interested in these things because they tickle my brain, and I'm just reading all this and I'm like, what the flying hell is going on? Like, it's nonsense, it's religious dogma, and the fact is they don't even allocate a single penny of funding to any experiments or projects or studies that even question the Big Bang assumption. Everybody is lockstep on the bandwagon, and nobody thinks like, after all the giant particle accelerators completely fail to find what they're supposedly looking for, nobody thinks like maybe we should question the fundamental assumptions. They just say, nope, we need more money, and we're going to build a bigger machine, and it's going to find the smaller particle, and that's going to allow us to do something. So give us $500 billion, and that'll let us run for the next 4 months, I think. It's insane the amount of money that's going to these things. There's people starving on this planet. There's genuine scientific advances that could be taking place if the funding would actually go to some of these other projects, like the electric universe, okay? Plasma cosmology makes so much more sense. Okay, it is so much easier for me as, an educated layman observing the new findings and discoveries coming out to say that there is a ether state throughout the universe. It's basically a medium for vast flows of electrical current. Modern gravitational cosmology holds that it's all just a vacuum, there's no electrical charge, and it's just rocks colliding with each other in a vast open space. But really, when you start to look at the data through the lens of plasma cosmology and realize that electricity and magnetism are thousands of times more powerful than gravity, okay? It's so much easier to explain the phenomena we see in the heavens with magnetism and electricity factored in. And this is uncomfortable information. People are asking, why hasn't this come out then? If it's so much easier, it's because there are a lot of political illusions that have been built on the assumptions of the way that, the universe works. One of which is global warming. Yeah, if people understood how much the sun influences Earth, they would realize that the whole premise of carbon dioxide causing this vast, wild climate change that we're observing is complete bullshit. It's bogus and it makes no sense, and that the sun is powered even by an external source. It's not just fusion of hydrogen and helium. That basically there are vast electric currents spreading throughout the universe like mycelium, like mushrooms in the ground. It's an information network transferring energy and exchanging basically light. Basically light is flowing through the universe, and it manifests in these toroidal spinning plasmoids, which we know as stars. Okay, and it's like Christmas lights on a string. Our sun is likely connected to several constellations in the sky, some more prominent than others. And this would explain a little bit about why in our vast mythological history on this planet, we have so many references to all these constellations, and some seem to be so much more important than all the others. About how lots of the pyramids and stuff line up with Orion and the Pleiades, and there's so much mythology, and all this science crowd just throws it aside as, wow, they must have taken some crazy drugs that they found in the jungle, and this was a wild hallucination. Maybe if it wasn't hallucination, Maybe the solar system used to be in a completely different configuration and things got thrown out of balance. And what they described as a war of the gods in the heavens was actually the planets finding a new equilibrium once they were thrown out of balance. And if space is not a vacuum, if it's not charge neutral, but it's actually ether and there's vast current and electricity flowing throughout it, this explains the behavior of comets. It explains how basically the sun heats up as you get away from the surface. It's basically, this is all of this. I mean, again, I'm not the plasma cosmologist, I'm just an interested observer. And reconciling everything back by Occam's razor, which philosophical axiom, the simplest explanation is probably the one that's true. I mean, you're talking about a whole fantasy of 500 unicorns doing a magical dance to explain the universe, coming out of a pinpoint, and it's expanding, and like, I could get into more detail, but this is the main point that I want to just drive home, that the Big Bang Theory is a load of fantasy, and that when your model can't predict anything, and it's surprised by every new piece of data that comes out, that's a sign that your model's bullshit, and that it's failed. And by comparison, several of the aspects of behavior of comets, of stars, of the Earth's magnetic field, of the Earth's relationship to the sun and other planets is explained by a electric universe where things are, the Earth is a giant sphere magnet, the sun is a giant sphere magnet, all of these are magnets interacting. And people want to say, oh, this is another point I'm not going to get into deep, but astrology, right? People say it's bullshit. There's no way that all these planets up there and stars could be influencing us down here on Earth. The gravity isn't that strong. No, gravity isn't that strong. But you're assuming that's all there is. What if there's vast current flows, there's electricity coming from every star that we see? The fact that we see its light means there's electricity being sent right here into my eyes from that star. Same thing with the planets. The planets and the Earth are all interacting, and when things align, okay, that's basically going to magnify the current of all the magnets, the planets, lined up in that radius, okay, in that line. And, oppositions, all of a sudden, all of the astrological things start to make more sense when you start to factor in the fact that all of the planets are interacting electromagnetically, okay? And there's so much more going on in the universe, okay? A vast network connecting all of the points, allowing instant communication faster than the speed of light. This is a basis for cosmic intelligence, guys. Do I really have to rehash the points that I'm not a Christian, I'm not an atheist, I believe in the power that drives the universe, and that makes me a spiritual scientist of sorts. Yes, I believe that those two are reconciled in this explanation. And if you want to call me a creationist for believing that there's a consciousness inherent in the universe, I'm going to remind you that the Big Bang was postulated by a Vatican cardinal, okay? A Jesuit, no less. And if you want to tell me that I'm like a crazy religious person for questioning things, which is, of course, the basis of science. Science, as Richard Feynman said, is a culture of doubt. But when you have a bunch of sycophants, a bunch of just cheerleaders of science, just waiting for their free lifestyle through Star Trek means and NASA to save them all, you guys look really silly, and I'm just helping you recognize that the emperor has no clothes, okay? The astronomical priesthood is naked. They have nothing to stand on at this point. And it's kind of silly that, I as an English major have to point this out to people who, esteem themselves far more scientific than I. But you know what? That's it. The Big Bang is bullshit. And there's so much more going on in the universe, and I hope that you take this information. I'm going to put some links down below, but Electric Universe, go to the Suspicious0bservers Channel. They have a morning news that does all the weather on the entire planet and analyzes the space weather, the sunspots on the sun. And I mean, based on this observation, we are now entering the era when we can predict earthquakes, how strong they are, and where they're going to take place purely by watching the sun. This is a fact. Okay, again, I'll put the links below, but there's a true revolution in science taking place right now, guys, and I hope you wake up that the Big Bang is bullshit and the universe is electric, and we got lots of big stuff coming down the pipeline. I'm excited. You should get excited too. Cheers.